Hi and welcome to the fourth of four videos for section 2.7. So in this section we're going to look at graphing of an inverse function. So at the end of video 3, and I probably should have left the material on the board here, but inverse function. So we had the square root graph and then the inverse. And so if I would have graphed them on the same graph, what you would have seen is that the graph of f inverse is obtained by reflecting the graph of f, by reflecting on the line y equals x. And so y equals x is what? That's the 45-degree line that cuts through the graph. So let's look at an example of that. So in this example, we want to graph the square root. Now let me put f of x is equal to. F of x is the square root of x minus 2. We want to graph f inverse of x. I want to find the equation for f inverse of x. And then again, I'm going to add this on here, state all the domains and ranges. So, number one, let's graph So number one, I want to graph the square root of x minus 2. So using our transformation to graphs that we learned earlier, we know the square root graph is what? The one that kind of skyrockets off to the right. The minus 2 is inside the function, so that's our IHOP. Inside is our horizontal shift. It's opposite of what I see. So instead of starting at 0, this is going to start at positive 2. So it starts at positive 2 and goes this way. Now, graph the inverse function. So again, the inverse function, the graph of it, is the graph that gets reflected on that horizontal line. So basically, if this was a question on the exam, take your paper, fold it at a 45-degree angle across the graph. If you hold it up to the light, you should see that the lines match up with each other, right? It's an easy trick to do. So what's it going to look like? If I take this graph and reflect it back up here, well, instead of starting at 2, 0, I start at 0, 2. And this one shoots up and off to the right, so this one's going to shoot what? Up and off to the top. So again, if I could fold this whiteboard, which I can't, but if I could fold this in half, these two lines would line up right over the top of each other. So the red is the inverse function graph, the green is the graph of the main function itself. So let's jump to 4 here for a minute. Well, now let's find the inverse function, then we'll do the domain and range. So the inverse function is what? How do I find that? So I set y equals square root of x minus 2. Solve for x, so I have to square both sides. So I get y squared equals x minus 2. Add 2 to both sides. So I get x is equal to y squared plus 2. And switch my x's and y's. So y, which is f inverse of x, is now equal to x squared plus 2. So the domain of f of x is what? Well, you could set this greater than or equal to 0, solve for x and so forth, but if you have a graph, it's usually easier just to look at the graph, because domain is what? It's all the x values. So the green starts at where? Positive 2 goes all the way to positive infinity. So the domain for f of x, and 2 is included, so it gets the bracket, goes from 2 to positive infinity. And the range of f of x is equal to what? Well, that's all the y values. So the green goes from 0 all the way up to infinity. 0 is included, goes up to infinity. So without even looking at the red graph, the inverse, let's write down the domain and range, and then we'll go check it on the graph if it came out right, or if it makes sense. So the domain of the inverse function is what? It's the range of the original. So it should be 0 to infinity. And the range of the inverse should be the domain of the original, which is 2 up to infinity. So let's go look at our red graph and see if this is right. The domain, all the x values, where do we go? 0 up to infinity. Perfect. The range goes from 2 up to infinity. Perfect. So it works out. The domain and range just switch places, and that's the relationship. That's the critical relationship. If you remember anything from this section, let that be it, because that's going to carry you on to 127, 181, and beyond. So super important relationship. That's why I added it in here. I can't stress enough how these guys are just the flip-flop of each other. So that's it. That wraps up video 4. That wraps up all the videos for section 2.7. Come on back and we'll start getting into chapter 3.